Welcome to the debate. Today, we are turning our attention to a document that sits on the desk of every hiring manager and weighs pretty heavily on the mind of every job seeker. It's a piece of paper, or let's be honest, a PDF, more likely these days, that is somehow both the most common and, I think, the most dreaded part of the hiring process. The source material calls it by many names: the covering letter, the motivation letter, but we all know it as the cover letter. It's a ubiquitous part of the professional world, yet its actual value is, well, a subject of intense scrutiny.
That is putting it mildly. I mean, depending on who you ask, the cover letter is either the absolute soul of an application, the place where a human being finally emerges from the data, or it's just an archaic, bureaucratic waste of everybody's time. So the core question we're grappling with today is, I think, pretty straightforward but divisive. Does the cover letter serve as a vital letter of introduction that gives necessary context to a resume? Or is it really just a marketing device used primarily for screening out applicants who don't jump through the right hoops?
I think you know where I stand. I'm here to argue that the cover letter is an essential instrument. As the literature suggests, it is the primary vehicle for explaining suitability, for demonstrating personality and passion, and frankly, for proving basic skills like grammar and punctuation. It is the human element in a pile of data. It turns a list of credentials into an actual person.
And I'm going to take the opposing view. I believe the material really supports the idea that the cover letters are often just an inefficient hurdle, a pitch or marketing device, to use the text's own words, that employers use to discard applicants who aren't, quote, sufficiently interested. It acts as a barrier to entry, and it prioritizes compliance and, business document formatting over actual professional capability. It's less about who you are and more about how well you can play the game.
Okay, I appreciate that framing, even if I fundamentally disagree with the cynicism there. Let's get into the details. When I look at the definition provided in the text, specifically that a cover letter is a letter of introduction attached to or accompanying another document, such as a resume, I see a necessary companion. Think about it. The resume is a list. It's cold, hard data. It tells you what someone did. But the source material makes a really critical distinction. While the resume outlines the professional journey, the cover letter is unique because it allows the applicant to convey personality, passion, and potential contributions. And that word potential, that's key. A resume looks backward at history. A cover letter looks forward at potential.
I see why you latch onto those words. Personality and passion sound very, very noble. They suggest this deep interpersonal connection. But let me give you a different perspective, one based on the economic reality described in the text. You're focusing on what the applicant gives, but the text is very clear about what the employer takes. The material explicitly defines the letter as a pitch describing one's interest in the position. A pitch. That's sales language, right? Not necessarily professional qualification language. And furthermore, the text states that employers look for these letters as one method of screening out applicants. That is a crucial phrase. It's not used to select the best. It's used to filter out the rest. It's a negative selection tool.
I'm not convinced that negative selection is inherently bad or that screening out is some villainous act. I mean, hiring is a funnel. Screening out is a necessary function of that process. If an applicant can't articulate their suitability for the desired positions, as the text notes, then they arguably aren't the right fit. The cover letter is the method for them to introduce themselves. Without it, you are asking a hiring manager to just infer suitability from a chronological list of dates. The cover letter bridges that gap between what a person has done and what they want to do. It provides the narrative arc that data alone just can't supply.
That's a compelling point about narrative. But have you considered that the screening isn't really about the content of the candidate's character, but about their ability to avoid technical pitfalls? The text notes that employers use it to screen out those who lack the necessary basic skills. But how are those skills defined? They're defined as avoiding mistakes and typos. So if the primary function of the document is to be a trap for typos or a test of whether someone is sufficiently interested enough to write a whole page of text, it functions more as a barrier to entry than a true measure of their professional journey. It just becomes a test of one's ability to write a marketing document, not do the job.
But isn't communication a part of almost every job? I feel like we're jumping ahead to the mechanics, and I do want to defend those later. But first, let's look at the core of the debate, specifically the function of the letter itself. The text presents a duality, the narrative versus the inventory.
Okay, let's unpack that, because I think the narrative value is often overstated in favor of what just ends up being a repetitive summary.
I have to disagree. The source material highlights that employers look for individualized and thoughtfully written cover letters. That phrase, individualized, is key. A resume is standardized, it has to be readable, but the cover letter is where the specific context happens. I mean, for example, look at the section on internships. The text mentions that students are often asked to submit a cover letter, and it should include examples of extracurricular and academic experiences. This is vital.
But why can't those just be in the resume?
Because a student's resume might be incredibly thin. It might just list a degree and a graduation date. It doesn't capture the leadership they showed in a debate club or the resilience from being on a sports team or the depth of a research project. The cover letter is the only space where that extracurricular context can live and breathe. It allows a candidate with less experience to explain why their academic background translates to suitability for a professional role. It's the equalizer for those who don't have a 10-year track record. It gives them a voice.
I come at it from a different angle. You say individualized, but the text also mentions that cover letters may simply be an inventory or summary of the documents included. So if I've already attached my resume, and now I'm writing a letter that's just an inventory of that resume, I'm just engaging in redundancy. It's bureaucratic duplication. And regarding the students, yes, they can include extracurriculars, but the text also demands they use a standard business letter format.
Which is a professional standard. I mean, learning the codes of the profession is part of entering the profession. You can't just act like formatting doesn't matter.
Or it's a gatekeeping mechanism. By demanding a standard business letter format from an intern who is likely just entering the workforce, you are privileging those who already know the code, the business document etiquette, over those who might have raw talent but just lack that specific cultural capital. The text even links cover letters to loan applications and contract drafts. It frames the cover letter not as some creative outlet for passion, but as a formal business document. It suggests we're testing for bureaucracy, not personality. If a brilliant coder writes a messy letter, do we lose them? I think we do, yes.
That is an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. The requirement for a standard business letter format isn't about arbitrary gatekeeping. It's about demonstrating basic skills and, frankly, respect for the reader. If you're applying for a role, showing that you understand the conventions of professional communication is relevant. The text notes that the letter is a way of explaining their suitability. If I can't structure a letter, how can I argue my suitability? A resume is historical, a cover letter is aspirational. It connects the history to the future.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the only way to gauge interest is through a prose document. The text calls it a pitch, and when we reduce a candidate's interest to their ability to write a good pitch, we are turning every single job application into a sales job. And let's look at the efficiency of this narrative. The text says employers use it to screen out those not sufficiently interested. So that implies if you don't write the letter or you write a generic one, you're deemed uninterested. But is that true, or is the candidate just busy? The demand for an individualized letter for every single application is a massive demand on the labor side, purely to save the employer time in screening out.
But that screening out mechanism is exactly what ensures quality. And this brings us to the technical requirements mentioned in the source. You seem to view the focus on mechanics as trivial, but I see it as a proxy for attention to detail.
I view it as a fetishization of grammar over substance.
Well, let's look at the evidence. The studies cited in the text say a good cover letter should be well punctuated and spelled and grammatically correct. It specifically says it should be free of mistakes and typos. In a professional environment, clarity is power. If a candidate submits a document that's full of errors, they are demonstrating a lack of care. It is a valid test of basic skills. If you can't take the time to proofread a one-page document that determines your employment, how can I trust you with a client contract or internal communications?
Basic skills in copy editing, maybe. But does a typo in a cover letter mean a software engineer can't code? Does a misplaced comma mean a nurse can't provide care? The text says employers look for these letters to screen out those lacking basic skills. But it defines those skills strictly in terms of the document itself: punctuation, spelling, formatting. It's a circular test.
You're testing their ability to write a cover letter, not their ability to do the job. And look at the other requirements listed. Use timelines to highlight chronological information.
What's wrong with that? It helps the reader understand the career trajectory. It puts the experience in order.
It's redundant. The resume is literally a chronological document. That is its entire function. Why must the applicant perform the labor of translating their resume into a sentence-based timeline in the letter? It feels like we are asking for an inventory or summary, as the text suggests, just to see if the applicant is obedient enough to do it. It conflates suitability with compliance. It's an exercise in checking boxes, not illuminating talent.
I think you're missing the forest for the trees. It's not just about the timeline. It's about the context of that timeline. The text says the letter should be specific and up-to-date and reference to the latest job positions. This is crucial. It forces the applicant to tailor their application. A good cover letter demonstrates some knowledge of the company. This is the antidote to the Easy Apply button.
The Easy Apply button exists because the volume of applications is so high. It's a reaction to the market.
Exactly. And the cover letter helps filter that volume. It proves the applicant isn't just spamming their resume everywhere. They've taken the time to gain knowledge of the company and explain why they fit this specific role. It indicates a deliberate choice, not a desperate scattershot approach. When an applicant cites specific company achievements or values, they are proving they are sufficiently interested.
And that is exactly where the burden becomes disproportionate. The text demands the letter be specific to the job being applied for and up to date. That requires significant research and writing time for a job the applicant might not even get an interview for. It is unpaid labor. The text calls it a marketing device for prospective job seekers. Usually, marketing is a department that gets paid. Here, the job seeker is expected to be their own marketing department, creating bespoke pitches for every single opening. And if they fail to demonstrate some knowledge of the company, they're screened out as not sufficiently interested. It conflates time to spend with interest in job.
It conflates effort with interest, which I would argue is a valid correlation. If you really want the role, you make the pitch. You invest the time. But there's another layer here we need to discuss: the different types of letters. The text distinguishes between the letter of application and the letter of inquiry.
Yes, the inquiry letter is particularly contentious in my view.
I find it to be the most passionate version of the document. The text defines the letter of inquiry as expressing interest in an organization when the job seeker is uncertain whether there are current openings. This is a bold, strategic move. It's not responding to an ad. It's a candidate saying, I believe in this organization enough to knock on the door even when it's closed.
Or it's a cold call in written form. It borders on intrusive.
It's a demonstration of high motivation. You're inquiring about possible positions rather than waiting to be told one exists. It shifts the power dynamic slightly. The applicant is initiating the contact. It shows agency. It shows that the candidate has done their research on the market and the organization, even without a prompt.
That is a very romantic way to view what is essentially a shot in the dark. But let's look at the constraints the text places on this. The text says a good cover letter must be specific to the job being applied for. How can you do that in a letter of inquiry when you don't even know if a job exists? You are, quote, uncertain whether there are current openings.
You tailor it to the organization's mission, not to a specific job number. You demonstrate alignment with their values and their needs. You pitch your utility.
But the requirement for specificity remains. The text says you must demonstrate suitability for the desired positions. In an inquiry, you are just guessing at the positions. And remember, the text notes that cover letters are used in connection with contract drafts and proposals. The inquiry letter feels less like a personal introduction and more like an unsolicited business proposal. And we all know how most of those are treated. They're often ignored. It's a high-effort, low-reward activity that the text frames as a standard part of the toolkit.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. Even if it is a proposal, that's how business works. The text links cover letters to loan applications and mortgage loans. Now, stick with me here. When you apply for a mortgage, you are making a case for your reliability. You are providing data, yes, but you're also verifying your standing. When you send a letter of inquiry, you're making a case for your value. It's an introduction. It allows the applicant to define themselves before a job description defines them.
But note the company it keeps in that list: mortgage loans, contract drafts, executed documents. These are high-stakes, legally binding, rigid documents. The text groups the cover letter with them. This just supports my argument that the cover letter is a creature of bureaucracy. It's a business document, not a heartfelt letter. When we treat it as a marketing device or a mortgage application equivalent, we strip away all the humanity you claim it possesses. We are just processing paperwork. It transforms a person into a risk assessment profile.
I would argue that personality and business document are not mutually exclusive. A loan application is dry, a cover letter is not. The text explicitly says, while the resume outlines the professional journey, a cover letter allows the applicant to convey their personality, passion, and potential contributions. That distinction is right there in the source material. You can't ignore that the text assigns a specific humanizing function to the letter that the resume lacks. The resume is the what, the cover letter is the who.
I don't ignore it, I just question its reality in practice. Yes, the text says it allows for passion, but in the next breath, it says employers use it for screening out. So if I pour my personality and passion into a letter, and it's used primarily to check if I made a typo or followed the standard business letter format, then my passion is just being used as a compliance check. The potential contributions are overshadowed by the need to be well punctuated. It asks for the soul, but it grades on the syntax.
But if you can't punctuate your passion, can you effectively communicate it in a professional setting? That's the crux of it. The screening ensures that the passion is intelligible. The text mentions that it serves to catch the reader's interest or persuade the reader of something. That persuasion is key. It's the only part of the application where you can actually persuade rather than just inform. A resume informs, a cover letter persuades. That is a powerful distinction.
That persuasion is exactly what the text calls a pitch. And that brings us right back to the fundamental inequity. If the cover letter is a marketing device, then the best cover letters will be written by marketers, not necessarily the best candidates. We're testing for the ability to sell oneself. A quiet, diligent researcher might write a dry letter and be screened out, while a charismatic but less skilled individual writes a brilliant pitch and gets through. The tool is biased toward the pitch.
We're testing for the ability to communicate to oneself. And in a world of data, that narrative is vital. If you can't explain why you matter, the data won't do it for you. You have to advocate for your own suitability.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered that the data, the resume, might actually be the more honest document? It's a record of what happened. The cover letter is a story about what happened, and stories can be manipulated. A pitch can be exaggerated. A marketing device is designed to gloss over flaws. The resume just lists the years, the degrees, the titles. The cover letter spins them.
And lists can be impersonal. They can fail to capture growth or pivots or soft skills or circle in the drain a bit. But I think we've illuminated the core tension. It really comes down to whether you value the efficiency of data or the nuance of narrative.
I agree. It's the tension between the human and the bureaucratic, between the letter of introduction and the screening device.
As we wrap up, I want to summarize my position in light of this discussion. The source material presents the cover letter as a multifaceted tool. Yes, it has rules. Yes, it requires a standard business letter format and must be free of mistakes. But these are the floor, not the ceiling. The ceiling is what the text describes as the ability to convey personality, passion, and potential contributions. It's the only space in an application where a candidate can truly introduce themselves and explain their suitability beyond just a list of dates. Without it, we are just sorting data points in a spreadsheet. It is the only document that treats the applicant as a person with motivation rather than a resource with experience.
And I maintain that the text reveals the cover letter to be a relic of business documents that often serves as a barrier. When the text defines it as a pitch, a marketing device, and a method for screening out, it reveals the document's true nature. It's a filter. It demands unpaid labor to be individualized and specific for every opening, and it penalizes those who lack the basic skills of business letter format proficiency. It prioritizes the pitch over the person and often measures compliance rather than capability. It's a marketing device that asks the applicant to productize themselves.
It is fascinating, though, isn't it? The source mentions that these letters are used for everything from internships to mortgages. It suggests that the ability to write a persuasive pitch is a fundamental skill in modern society, extending far beyond just finding a job.
That is true. Whether you're asking for a job or a house, you have to play the game. You have to write the letter. The tension remains between the employer's need to efficiently screen out the noise and the applicant's desperate need to convey personality in a system designed to process them as files.
Indeed.
It's a balance between the efficiency of the inventory and the humanity of the introduction. There's certainly more to explore in how we present ourselves on paper, but for now, we'll leave you to draw your own conclusions on whether the cover letter is a bridge or a wall.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for joining the debate.